All right, so our session today is called Using ACES TIF to Nurture the Whole Learner, okay? And what we are specifically going to be talking about today are ways to bring social and emotional learning, or SEL, activities that you can use with your students that will develop both those SEL competencies and have a strong alignment with ACES TIF. So my name is Stephanie Summers, as Gail said. I am the ACES coordinator through Atlas, and I also work for Minneapolis Adult Education. And I am joined today by an amazing colleague, Dr. Jamie Kreil. Jamie, do you want to say hello?
Sure. My name is Jamie Kreil. I'm a beginning level ESL teacher at Cedar Riverside Adult Education Collaborative, and I'm also adjunct faculty at Hamlin, where currently I'm actually leading the field experience for ABE licensure.
Oh, awesome. And in addition to those amazing accomplishments, Jamie has also been a part of the ACES advisory team, the TIF 2.0 advisory team that has been helping to shape some of the work that we're doing on making updates to ACES TIF. And one of those updates has been trying to bring social and emotional learning into more of a focus with the different categories and with the lessons that we're sharing. So I'm really excited to have Jamie with me today, and she's going to be sharing some ideas that she's used with her learners when we get into that in just a little while. Okay. I know we're a little bit of a small group today. Would you mind putting your name in the chat and maybe what type of students you work with, if they're more low level like ELL students, or if you have, if anyone works with more at the GED or HSE level? I think we're such a small group. It would be great to kind of know who's here and know the levels you work with. And that way we can try to highlight activities. Okay, so Susan is high level. And we've got Tracy, all levels. Yeah, one room schoolhouse. Okay. Okay, and Rachel, welcome. Rachel's here working with all levels as well. And we've got Astrid here. And then we've got some low level. Callie. Callie was also on our advisory team, as was Teresa. Wonderful to have you here today. Laura, all levels. So we've got a lot of people kind of doing that one room schoolhouse. Okay. And then some beginning and some advanced. Okay, great. Thank you so much. We will try to make this as meaningful and relevant as we can for everyone. So in the time we have today, we want to first sort of lay a foundation so that everyone understands the rationale behind including this focus on social and emotional learning in our ABE classroom. We're going to watch a video in just a minute that I think will show the strong overlap that exists between the social and emotional learning competencies and ACES TIF. Then we'll spend a lot of time exploring some activities for activities that will work to develop both sets of competencies, ACES TIF and social and emotional learning. And then we'll spend some time at the end talking about some resources and how you might be able to use those with your learners, okay? Especially because we're a small group, I'm hoping we can be more interactive today. If you have questions, please do use the chat box or raise your hand. We'll be pausing from time to time, asking people to share ideas. And then there will be one breakout room where you'll get to speak with some of your colleagues about how you develop some of these skills with your learners. All right. So to get started, we'll kind of go over some basic vocabulary, because I know maybe not everyone's very familiar with what social emotional learning is. So again, when we started, and it was about a year ago now, when we started working on making some updates to ACES TIF, it's been 10 years since the original project launched. That was back in 2013. And so we decided that we know a lot has changed, in ABE in those 10 years. And so we wanted to revisit, especially our lesson materials. We do have sample lessons, and we wanted to make sure that those were still relevant for the types of classes and learning environments that our ABE teachers are working in today. So for example, back in 2013, most of us weren't doing any online learning or any online classes with our students. And we weren't offering high flex classes. We weren't using as many technology supports with our students. So we just wanted to, when we made these updates, our goal was to sort of just be mindful of the fact that times have changed. And we wanted to include more ideas for teaching online, for example. The old lessons were definitely developed to be used in an in-person learning environment. The new lessons have more ideas and ways to adapt them to an online class or a high flex class. And then other things that we wanted to bring into the project were some of the trends that have really started to shape not just ABE, but education, higher education, and the workplace over the past few years. And so those two things are DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and talking about why that is so important. Our last TIFty Tuesday webinar that was in March focused on that topic. And then social and emotional learning, especially coming out of COVID. And we have all heard the reports about how many people have suffered from some stress, mental health issues, anxiety. We know that more and more people are talking about these issues today than they have in the past. We also know that stress and anxiety impair our ability to learn. When our body feels stressed, our brains and our bodies release hormones that make it more difficult for us to receive and retain new information. And so social and emotional learning is sort of a response to some of those things. It is the idea that we really can't expect people to learn unless we are also helping them to be more aware of their emotional needs. And that's things like feeling comfortable in the classroom, feeling connected to other people, thinking about our own feelings and how our feelings impact our behaviors. All of these things go into social and emotional learning. And this is why it's become something that is very often talked about in education today. It is really a hot topic in K-12 education, but it is also important for our adult learners, not just because we know our adult learners also suffer from stress and anxiety and sometimes struggle to manage their emotions, but also because many of our adult learners are parents. And being able to raise healthy children starts with being a healthy adult. And so for all of these reasons, social and emotional learning is really important. So the definition you see here comes from an organization called CASEL, and that stands for the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. This is really like a key source for information about SEL. They define social emotional learning as an integral part of education and human development. SEL is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals. Feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. So again, this definition comes from CASEL. It is the definition we included in some of our updated resources because they are such a well-regarded source on this topic. Another thing I'll point out is sometimes people say social and emotional learning. Sometimes they say social emotional learning. It's the same thing. Both are acceptable terms, and you might have heard both being thrown around. So why is social and emotional learning important? SEL allows learners to understand themselves and others better, to communicate about emotions, attitudes, and options, and to work towards goal setting, as well as college and career readiness skills. So this information comes from a resource that we'll be looking at later on. It was developed by Virginia Adult Learning Resource Center, and it is called the Social and Emotional Learning for Adult Multilingual Learners Toolkit. It's quite a mouthful. I recently wrote a newsletter article about this resource, and I think that this quote does a good job of helping us to understand why we need to be thinking about these skills with our students. If we want our students to be able to set goals and work towards those goals and see them through to completion, we need to be having some focus on these skills. All right, so we're going to watch a short video. It's about 3 minutes. I am going to skip over the very beginning because in the very beginning, it talks about young people quite a bit. Again, keep in mind, a lot of SEL up to this point has focused on helping young people in K-12 settings. They will talk about young people and adults, so please excuse when you hear young people here. This video is going to talk about and explain the 5 core SEL competencies. And as we're watching it, I am hoping that you will join me in trying to listen for language, like key terms that you think are related to ACES TIF, or terms that might link social emotional learning to ACES TIF. I think there's a lot of overlap. And so I'll ask you to share some of your ideas when the video finishes. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? That we're just going to kind of be listening for words that sound maybe TIFy to you while we're watching this video. So let me, here we go. I've been practicing my skill of being able to go between screens when I am presenting. So I hope that I'm doing this correctly. When I'm going to start showing the video, here we go. And I'm just going to, again, advance it a little bit.
SEL is the process through which young people and adults acquire and apply.
So Stephanie, it's not actually showing.
Attitudes that help us to understand ourselves, connect
Yeah,
with
it's
our
playing, but it's
goals,
not showing.
and
It's
support
on
our
the
communities.
wrong slide.
We
Okay.
all need opportunities to learn and
Just a
engage in
minute.
environments where we feel safe, valued, and a
Let me
sense of
try
belonging.
to,
So how does SEL help schools, families, and communities work together?
I tell you, this is my goal for this year, to somehow be able to do a better job of sharing things during webinars. Okay, one more minute. Let me try again. So this is what I want to share. Sharing this. We're looking at, do you see now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right,
Yes.
thanks.
Perfect.
Yeah. Sorry, everybody.
you.
We'll do it again. Growth mindset here. I'm going to get this right one of these days. Here we go.
Process through which young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that help us to understand ourselves, connect with others, achieve our goals, and support our communities. We all need opportunities to learn and engage in environments where we feel safe, valued, and a sense of belonging. So how does SEL help schools, families, and communities work together so that all young people have these kinds of learning experiences and achieve success in education, careers, and life? CASEL's framework identifies 5 areas of competence that together help us develop a healthy sense of who we are, manage stress, understand the views of others, and work together to create schools and communities where everyone can grow their strengths and interests. Self-awareness is about how we think about ourselves and who we are. It includes understanding our culture, our thoughts, feelings, and what we believe we're capable of, and understanding how these things can influence our behaviors and beliefs. Self-management is the ability to manage those emotions, thoughts, and actions in different situations so that we can achieve individual and collective goals. This includes coping with stress and anxiety, persevering through challenges, and taking action to create positive change. Social awareness is how we understand others, how we learn to take different perspectives and empathize, even with people who are different from us. It also includes understanding how the broader norms and systems around us influence how we develop and create a sense of belonging. Relationship skills are how we connect and engage effectively with others, and how we form lasting friendships and connections. This includes communicating clearly, solving problems together, managing conflict and disagreements, and standing up for ourselves and the rights of others. Lastly, responsible decision-making is how we put it all together to make caring and constructive choices. This includes thinking critically about consequences, analyzing the impact of our actions on ourselves and others, and identifying solutions that support our collective well-being. We continue to develop and practice SEL throughout our lives and can adapt and apply these competencies across different contexts and cultures. How we develop SEL is impacted by our environments, which is why we need to work together across classrooms, schools, families, and communities. In the classroom, students can be explicitly taught SEL skills and also can practice and apply SEL during core subjects, like discussing different perspectives in social studies and language arts, or collaboratively problem solving in science or math. SEL is most effective when supported by evidence-based programs and trusting relationships where students are treated as partners in their learning. Beyond the classroom, SEL can be intentionally promoted throughout the school experience, from the way they're greeted in the morning to how discipline practices are carried out, and how adults themselves develop and model positive relationships and the SEL competencies. Outside of school, families and caregivers provide the earliest and ongoing learning and interactions for their children. So it's important that schools listen to and authentically partner with families to help shape SEL priorities and strategies for supporting their children. Similarly, when schools partner with community organizations to align their efforts, SEL opportunities can be strengthened and students benefit even more. With SEL, we can help create schools and learning spaces where all young people feel connected, inspired, engaged, and ready to contribute to the world around them.
All right, so again, I do know they mentioned young people several times, but hopefully we can just kind of substitute all people when we hear that. While I work to get my screen back on the slides, I'm wondering if people would please share in the chat any terms you heard from the video that remind you of ACES TIF. So if you would be able to do that, that would be great. And I will get the slides back up for us. Okay. Oops. Well, I did it partly correct. There we go. Okay.
Self-management, critical thinking, problem solving, self-management again, okay. Responsible decision-making. Okay, self-management, goals and problem solving. Relationship skills. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. A couple other words that I saw. Teresa and I've long suspected we share a brain. Yes, Teresa, norms. I had norms, effective communication, and engagement also, along with perseverance, the word potential and reaching goals, and self-advocacy, which we know is a big part of navigating systems. So hopefully you can kind of see how there is a tight and strong overlap between these social emotional learning competencies and our ACES TIF skills. So according to CASEL, the 5 categories on the wheel, their competency wheel, are self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. And so I would argue in ACES TIF, we talk about all of these things, but some of our categories are a little differently named. We have self-management, of course. I think some of our relationship skills would come under effective communication. Responsible decision-making would have some overlap with critical thinking, of course. Self-awareness and social awareness in particular, I think, overlap with navigating systems. And so there are a lot of natural connections between these 2 frameworks. All right, thanks for taking notes during the video and sharing those in the chat. And thank you to Jamie for reading out the chat when I was getting myself reorganized here. So we're gonna focus on 2 TIF categories today. If you've joined us for our other TIFty Tuesday webinars, then you know that we've talked about there are 6 total ACES TIF categories. We've talked about the other 4 in the previous webinars. And so today we'll be talking about critical thinking and navigating systems, okay? And so this definition for critical thinking comes from the Transitions Integration Framework, the TIF. Critical thinking requires disciplined thinking that is open-minded, rational, and informed by evidence in order to arrive at decisions or conclusions that go beyond factual recall. In ABE classrooms, critical thinking skills involve actively applying thinking strategies that range from analyzing relationships between components to drawing conclusions from a variety of data. Critical thinking skills are increasingly essential for ABE learners to succeed in the workplace, higher education, and in navigating the complexities of 21st century life. And before I go on to the next screen, I will just share with you that this new icon here of the light bulb is one of our 6 newly adapted TIF icons. There was some graphic design work that came out of our TIF 2.0 project. And to add some consistency and some new branding, each category now has a symbol. And so all lesson plans and materials that align with that category going forward on the website will be associated with the same symbol. And so the one for critical thinking is this light bulb with the little puzzle piece in the corner, and you'll see the one for navigating systems in a few minutes. So, it's kind of a fun change, and it'll be a nice way for us to have kind of a visual reminder of what this category means. All right, so we are going to talk a little bit about some activities that would help to support critical thinking skills as well as social emotional learning. One classic critical thinking task is to do some sorting. We know that sorting and categorizing information falls under critical thinking. And so using something like a T-chart to sort emotions could be a great activity, especially at the lower levels. So a T-chart usually is just a piece of paper with a line down the middle, and it creates two columns where information can be sorted into two categories. And so we could sort, some simple ideas would be to sort by positive and negative emotions. If positive and negative, if that vocabulary is a little too advanced, maybe just is this emotion happy or sad? So why would we do this? Well, being able to talk about one's emotions is an important part of social and emotional learning. Activities that help our learners identify and use the vocabulary necessary to discuss a wide range of emotions can be very valuable. Using a simple T-chart, learners can sort emotion vocabulary. If your learners are really at that low, like pre-literate level, we could use photos, maybe like emojis, and have them sort maybe based on, the facial expression. That might be a way to make this a little less text-based. If you teach higher level learners, and I know a lot of you do, this could be a great way to introduce your students to some more complex vocabulary for discussing feelings or emotions. So to find these word lists, I simply Googled vocabulary for feelings. And there were quite a few different word lists that popped up. These were two that I thought had a lot of variety to them. Both of these at the end of the slides, which you will be sent as a follow-up to today's webinar, you will have a link. There's a resource page at the back of the slides, and both of these lists are included there. But I know that, these words sometimes come up in academic text. Words like withdrawn, right? Words like grouchy, optimistic, mortified. So I think a way to make this relevant to higher level students would just be to increase the vocabulary, the complexity of the vocabulary, while doing something like a sorting activity. You also wouldn't have to make it, the categories for sorting so simple. Rather than positive and negative, you could try something like motivating, demotivating, right? To make this feel a little more advanced for those of you who work with higher level students. Another idea might be to have your learners read a text and then discuss how a character is likely feeling before, during, or after a particular situation. Part of social emotional learning is helping us to understand how our emotions and feelings contribute to our decision-making and behaviors, right? An example of that from our students might be, I haven't come to school recently because I'm feeling a little frustrated, or I'm feeling a little discouraged, right? And so helping our students think about and recognize how our feelings impact our choices is a great activity. It also can be the type of thing that comes up in text questions, right? So understanding how a character is thinking and feeling in a particular situation is part of comprehending a text. And so I just grabbed a couple of my favorite ESL books. The novel Scenes series. Have people looked at these before? I know they're not new, but these are sort of like soap opera-y text where one character has to go through a number of situations. So the low beginning one has to do with a woman who works in a dry cleaners. The intermediate or high beginning has to do with this gentleman who's a taxi driver. And they go through a number of different kind of situations that might make good opportunities to discuss how people are feeling and maybe what's motivating their decision making. These are just a couple of examples, of course. There are many other types of examples. Reading skills for today's adults. That free resource developed right here in Minnesota that I know people are very familiar with. If you haven't looked at it in a few years, you might not know that it too has been updated, and there have been some supplementary resources added. So here's one that I pulled, Citizenship, a Dream Come True. I might read this with my students and then try some sentence starters or sentence frames. In the story, me feels blank because blank, right? Who can skim that story and show me a complete sentence in the chat? Give people a moment. How is me feeling? You might even be able to guess from the title, which is Citizenship, a Dream Come True. How would one of our students feel? Yes. In the story, me feels proud. Thanks, Heather. Why is she proud? She is proud because she feels happy and proud. Yes. In the story, me feels happy and proud. Why? Because she was successful. She feels successful. Maybe she feels successful. So this is great. We've got a lot of different words. And the reason she's feeling this way is because she passed her citizenship test. So being able to express that using the sentence frame would be some great writing. And then, oh, yes, thank you, Heather. In the story, me feels proud because she became a citizen. Yes, very good. Heather's an excellent student because she used all the right verb tenses. Wonderful, Heather. A time when I felt like me was when. So then after we identify how me is feeling and why, we could provide an opportunity to our students to talk about a time when they felt proud, a time when they could discuss some of their accomplishments, either with a large group or in a small group or with a partner. Okay. And then some other source material, if you wanted to do an activity like this, would be Journeys. Of course, the book that comes out every spring, which is our own anthology of adult student writing from here in Minnesota. The Change Agent is an online magazine that comes out, I think, twice a year. The Change Agent is national. It's published by World Education. It does cost. There's a very small subscription fee to use the Change Agent. What's great about both of these publications is the texts are often grouped by themes. So there's a theme about, hopes and dreams. There might be a theme about things I have lost, a theme about, themes about being an immigrant experience, or a theme about, sometimes like being made to feel like an outsider. And so learners could read two texts on a similar topic, something like leaving home, and compare their feelings to those of the author, possibly write a compare and contrast paragraph talking about the feelings or the experience. This could also be an opportunity to do some like a reaction type paragraph. Learners could discuss their emotional reactions to a particular story and examine why their reaction might be different from that of a classmate. So this might be something we do with students who are able to share with a little more vocabulary for talking about their experiences, but kind of examining why the way I feel, my reaction to a story might not be the same of yours, because we have different experiences, right? Or because we walk through life in different skin, or because people see us differently, right? So I think that could be a way to make connections in the classroom, and also to get students kind of talking about and thinking about issues such as privilege, for example, If anyone has any other types of texts or sources that might be good to use with activities like this, I'd love for you to share them in the chat if you have some go-to resources when you want your students to do some reading, for example. Please feel free to share that in the chat. Here is another kind of activity. This one is called What Would You Do? This activity is related to problem solving. So practicing how to make tough decisions can help your students learn how their actions affect others. Give your students a list of situations in which they would have to make an important choice. Have them write down an answer to each situation by themselves and discuss their answers as a class. So here are a few problem-solving scenarios to get your students started. A classmate asks if you can drive her home after class. It will take you at least an extra 40 minutes to drive her home. What do you say? Your boss wants you to work an extra shift over the weekend. It would be nice to have the extra money, but it is also your child's birthday and you were planning to spend time together. What would you say? Some coworkers invite you out for drinks after work. You do not drink alcohol. How would you respond? So I think these situations are so great for our adult learners because they bring in culture and the idea that the way that we respond to a lot of life events can really depend on our culture. And so helping our students learn how to say and what to say in different situations, I think is really useful for their navigating outside of school, navigating social situations outside of school. So this idea I found online. You can see at the bottom here, it was from waterford.org. It was some activities for specifically for teaching CASEL competencies. Here, this particular scenario came from some materials from CalPro, and these were developed by Jamie Adelstein Goldberg. So Don works in a large warehouse and he always wears safety equipment. His coworker, Mike, always forgets his safety equipment. He often asks to borrow Don's equipment when Don isn't using it. Last week, Mike broke Don's safety glasses, and yesterday he lost Don's back belt. Don doesn't want Mike to get hurt, but he doesn't want to loan Mike his equipment. What are some things he can say to Mike the next time Mike asks to borrow something? Okay. And then the second scenario is about a job interview. Manuel has a very important job interview at City College today. The campus is very large. But he cannot find the employment office. He asked different people for directions, but he is lost. It's 5 minutes before the job interview appointment. What is your advice? So I think these could be used in different ways. We could maybe, have like a problem of the week and use them as a warm-up activity. Use them as conversation starters for small group activities. So there's a lot of different problem-solving scenarios involved online. I found these simply by searching for problem-solving scenarios for adults, and I just am sharing a few of the examples I found here. So these I found online. I found this resource online. I did sort of tweak some of these to make sense for our adult learners. So some of this I did some adapting. And then another thing that I have recently been playing around with, I created these problem-solving scenarios using ChatGPT. So I have been doing some work with Christine Kelly, and Christine's been noodling around with ChatGPT, and we tried it out with our writing study circle last week. And I bet you didn't know ChatGPT can be used to create worksheets and materials for you to use in your classroom. So I will admit these are not the end all be all best problem solving scenarios of all time. However, I could have made these better if I had spent more time focusing the question I was asking. So the way it works is you as a user input exactly what you want the software to generate. And like most things, your input is affects your output. So the more clear and detailed you can be in giving your directions to the software, the better tailored your answers are going to be. But considering that this took about 3 seconds to create, it's not bad. So, the time management, you are a working adult who struggles to balance your work and personal life. You often feel overwhelmed and stressed out. Develop a plan to better manage your time and reduce your stress levels. So I would like these to be a little bit more developed scenarios with a few more variables, but again, they at least could be a starting point, created using a free basic user account with ChatGPT. All right. And then the final thing that I'll share, and I know that I've shared these resources before, but on the Links website, the Teaching Skills That Matter collection, this is a federal initiative that shares lesson plans that were developed in 5 content areas. Those areas are digital literacy, health literacy, financial literacy, workforce preparation, and civics. Each of those content areas has at least 5 sample lesson plans that are free to download and use from the Links website. And for each of those areas, at least one of those lesson plans is going to be problem-based learning. So this is the problem-based learning lesson from digital literacy. It has to do with cultural stereotypes. And so again, you might not be able to pull and use this lesson exactly as written, but these lessons were written by subject matter experts, and they have been field tested by ABE teachers all over the country. So they are solid lessons for you to use as a starting point for maybe developing your own problem-based learning scenarios. No problem, Callie. That is what I'm here for, sharing some resources. Okay, so with that, those are my ideas for critical thinking. Oh, excuse me, nope, not quite yet. So here, this problem-based learning about stereotypes, I just thought I'd show you a little bit of what the lesson is like. Students read about a gender stereotype, all girls like pink. There's links to a few different articles on that. And then the activity is students either write a letter to the editor or compose a social media comment or reply in which they talk about why stereotypes are harmful. Okay, so kind of a neat activity. And of course, there are all types of different stereotypes that we could use. It wouldn't have to be one that was gender-based. Okay, and now I'm going to hand it over to Jamie for a few minutes, and maybe Jamie can come on screen while I once again very gracefully transition to the resources Jamie's going to share. So one moment.
Okay. That's actually an excellent segue, that discussion about stereotypes, into what I'm going to share with you. So when I was thinking about what would go with the critical thinking skill development through an SEL lens, I thought about this lesson plan here from IMABE. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is sort of a movement that started in 2016 in response to the election that happened, and how our students were feeling about it. And at that time, we heard from many of our learners that they were hearing things about their communities from others. And so we decided to create a lesson that helped them become aware of people's stereotypes that may be promulgated about their community, or stereotypes that they may hold themselves about others. So there's that self-awareness and social awareness component. And part of this lesson is also a self-advocacy component, where they turn those stereotypes on their heads and say, no, I am this. So with that in mind, I'm going to walk you through this lesson. And by the way, this is sort of our beginning level ESL lesson, and it's CASES 153 to about 200. So it's a pretty wide range. We have built-in flexibility for some higher level learners as well. Okay, so during the warm-up, we would provide, a set of generic pictures depicting groups of people, and you would have learners elicit what they see. So a man, a woman, old, young, etc. And we have sample pictures provided for you, or you could collect your own. And then they would write those on the index cards, and those become categories, just like, and it's going to lead into a sorting activity, which we discussed previously as one of our critical thinking activities, which is pretty typical at a beginning level. So based on student responses, we make those index cards, and then we introduce the question, are you? And then it would be a simple reply of yes or no, model a few of those examples. And then they will identify the vocabulary they attribute to their own identity. Okay, so that's the warm-up. Let's move to the introduction. And by the way, this is in the sort of the same format as many of our TIF lessons, actually all of our TIF lessons. This was taken from the model that was shared a few years ago. So simple warm-up, intro, guided practice, independent practice, and extension, just as a note. So then we'll show more pictures that reflect some aspect of our students' identities. And we have a set of pictures where there's sort of a zoomed in on the right, and then you zoom out on the left. And the zoomed in, yep, the zoomed in portion, we'll want students to, to assign them to the category that they think it is. So it might look like, for example, we had someone who had a very, very long hair, and and I've done this with my students before, and they'll say woman, and you'll zoom out, and it's not what they originally thought. And it's actually, we have a little sentence that says he is a man. And so there we're introducing the idea that what appears to be true may not actually be true. And you can do this by returning to the are you question, and then using the picture on the right, ask is he or she or they, and then the answer should be no. So that's how you can show what a stereotype is at this level. And then we move into our yes or no chart, which is another form of a T-chart. And we'll orally model a few I am sentences to help refute the stereotype examples about yourself and then the students. So ask students, for example, if you're a teacher, am I a student? They should say no. Write student in the no column. So they're writing those words that they had on their index cards, and say, no, I am not. I am a teacher. That is how you model how to refute a stereotype. Write teacher in the yes column. And then you refer back to the stereotype pictures to illustrate how to refute the stereotypes. So then you distribute the chart to the students, and they copy the words from their warm-up cards into the appropriate column for themselves. Okay. And then we have a few volunteers where we run an example from the no column. So you ask the question, are you? They should say no, and then ask the student select the word from the yes column. So are you, let me think, what was one? Man and woman, old and young, it seems to be pretty typical at the super beginning level. So, but then we'll write a couple of I am statements together and emphasize the difference between I am or I am a. You don't need to use metalinguistic terminology at this point, but you can with higher level students, and explain in terms of people, description, and names, pronouns. And move into the independent practice. Lower level students have a sentence stem, I am statements, and they can copy their sentences. And then more advanced learners write complete sentences. So we have the basic worksheet and the challenge worksheet just as a way to extend it to higher level learners. And then another way, so this builds in the self-awareness component of identifying maybe stereotypes that they may hold about others, and the social awareness stereotypes that others have about their communities. And then this writing the I am statements is the sort of the self-advocacy component. And so we might have students type the statements using Word, or when we do this, there's a social media component in the larger lesson plan that we have on our website, where they can write those and share them in a way that they want to with the appropriate privacy settings. So then that might be also a problem-solving component in this. Yeah, so that is the refuting stereotypes lesson from IMABE. So just to summarize, so we have the critical thinking skills of categorizing and problem solving. So with self-awareness, social awareness, and self-advocacy built into it, which are part and parcel of social emotional learning. Okay.
All right, thank you, Jamie. While I kind of bring my slides back, if anyone has questions about this lesson, please go ahead and you can put those in the chat. And then in a couple, like 2 or 3 minutes, Jamie's going to come back and share another lesson with us that's related to navigating systems. When we get back on our slides, you will have, are you guys seeing the slides again?
Yeah.
Excellent. So the lesson plan is what you see on the right here. These materials, there's a Facebook page. There is also a Google site, and there are a number of lessons available on the Google site. And I put the Google site on the resource list if you are interested in checking out more lessons. And the Facebook page is more the advocacy piece. Is that right, Jamie?
That's correct. Yeah, the Google site and the Facebook page are separate. The Google site is where we host all of our materials, including past presentations. And then the Facebook page is where we engage with the community, and other ABE sites share their stories, share their learner stories, or we have learners share their stories.
Yeah, and I know there's a number of wonderful lessons on the Google site. One that I have had Chris Class share during a previous ACES webinar is one about helping your students use more gender inclusive pronouns. Do you know the one I'm talking about, Jamie?
Yeah, we intentionally did a lesson that was at a lower level and introduced a sort of a stock photo library that was more inclusive of everybody, all gender identities, and teaching singular they to a beginning ESL class, for instance, it sort of emphasized that.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. They're all wonderful lessons and written by wonderful teachers who have expertise at these different levels. And so they're really wonderful, and they're all open source to use, I believe, right, Jamie?
They are, correct.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, wonderful, Laura. Yeah, so you should have everything you need, plus we're being recorded here, so you should be in good shape to kind of catch up on what you missed. And I'm glad you've been able to spend what time you have with us today. I know you're busy. All right, folks. So to kind of wrap up our section on critical thinking, I just want to share that the new lesson plans, Gail just put in the chat. So these are in a folder, a Google folder, and the Google folder there's a link to that folder on the Atlas website. So for the critical thinking category, we'll have advanced problem solving, which will have to do with transportation, intermediate map reading, and beginning map reading. I will tell you the critical thinking lessons should be ready by the end of this month. There's still some tweaks to be made. Here's it. The I believe it's the intermediate level lesson is the most developed right now. And so the critical thinking skill being practiced is sort of directions and asking for directions. And so it is a good one. You can see on here, all of the new lesson plans do have a section on diversity, equity, and inclusion and social emotional learning. We were so lucky to work with wonderful ABE experts on our advisory team. So at least one lesson from each category did go through a review process where we received feedback, and teachers like Jamie and Teresa and Callie gave us ideas for how we could make the materials more level appropriate. For example, ideas, I believe this idea about when we talk about the community, often in an ESL textbook, it's like the mall, the post office, the bakery. And so to bring in a little diversity, equity, and inclusion, we wanted to make some of those places reflect the communities our students live in. So maybe it could be the Somali mall, the Panaderia, the Asian grocery store, rather than just kind of those generic labels that we often see on worksheet maps. So the critical thinking lessons, they do follow that format that Jamie talked about with a warm-up, introduction, guided practice, independent practice, and then assessment or reflection. So that is one of the things that makes the new lessons nice, is they really follow a consistent format, and we've tried to simplify them a little bit, where the first few pages are the lesson, and then the materials can all be found at the end. These again are all open source. They were created to be shared and adapted with anyone who would be interested in using them. All right. So as we'll pause for maybe like 1 minute. We'll ask people for an example of a critical thinking or collaborative problem solving activity you might have tried with your students. So you've seen some of our examples doing the sorting or categorizing, looking at some of those problem scenarios and having students discuss how they would solve the problems or address the issue. What have you been doing in your classes? Do you have any critical thinking or problem solving activities? We'd love to get your ideas. I'd love to see a few people share in the chat. So we'll just pause for a minute to give people time to think. So again, we would love to have a couple ideas in the chat, something you do, or if you don't want to use the chat, heck, we could raise our hands, or we could just ask, invite people to use their mics to share some activity or learning task that you have used that works for critical thinking or problem solving. In addition to practicing my transition skills with slides. I'm also practicing my wait time, so. Ah, wonderful. Thank you, Laura. We often work on finding various ways to work around problem-solving activities, often unplanned. Oh, yeah, you know, I think, Laura, what you're saying is like if a student's having, for example, a tech issue, I think if you pause and work together to solve that problem, as kind of a class, maybe modeling some of the language or thought processes that go on, even talking about, you know, we have a few different ideas. How do we evaluate those ideas? That's great. We often work on finding various ways to work around problem-solving activities, how to print documents, steps to write a research paper, how to find resources, what next activities. Yeah, I love that. And I think, again, using language, using some problem-solving language is a great way to kind of do a think aloud with your students when you are talking about problem solving. That's awesome. I do that in my online classes. Like if a student is having sound issues, I'll ask other students if anyone can provide some assistance, because often the students are better at troubleshooting than I am. And Callie says, IET healthcare courses, create a chart of healthcare careers, characteristics of healthcare workers, choose your top 3 and describe why that is their top choice and how they might reach that goal. Yeah, that's a really rich example. So talking about why, you know, out of 3 choices, how did you identify the one that was your top choice? So what was your criteria? And identifying criteria for decision making is a great skill. And Laura says, we can have 10 students working on 10 different lessons. Yep. You know, I'm making a mess with these here. Sorry about that, folks. We get so much of what we do is individualized. They are never here at the same time. Yes, I know in those one-room schoolhouses, maybe doing group activities doesn't work. So maybe thinking of ways that you can collaborate, like talking through someone's problem or a problem that maybe is common for students to have, is a great way to bring that in. IET, how would the patient be able to pay for that surgery? How would the nurse communicate best to their patients? How a doctor would communicate to patients a serious medical condition? These are great contextualized examples for people maybe working in a healthcare career pathway. Even though in an ELL class, we often cover health as a topic, and talking about patient-doctor communication is a great example of problem solving. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Laura and Callie, for sharing those ideas. I really appreciate it. And I know other people have ideas as well. I know sometimes we just can't come up with them on the spot. So thank you all for your contributions. So next we'll move on to navigating systems here. Navigating systems is the ability to successfully operate within the institutions and organizational structures, such as school, workplace, or community in one's life. Successful learners are those who are able to adapt to their environment and problem solve when issues arise. Examples of activities in this category could include looking at and evaluating processes, evaluating and fitting into a particular environment, and understanding and breaking down policies. Teaching the skills in this category will assist the learner in understanding new experiences and help them to become their own best advocate. And in the corner again, we see the new icon that will represent navigating systems. And so in the future, if you're looking for a lesson or a resource to help you build skills or competency in this category, this will be the icon to look for. All right, so I'm going to hand it back over to Jamie. And I am going to try once again to very gracefully navigate to this Weebly site that Gail just chatted out for us. So just a moment here.
Yeah, this website was created, I think, as a part of a grant maybe 10 years ago with Hmong American Partnership. And this is our colleague Chris Kloss's work on that, and it's a pre-lit or intro level ELL curriculum, and there's also a numeracy curriculum. So this is, you can access any of the materials on here if you have a Google account. You'll be asked to sign in to be able to access the materials. If there is something you click on, it says request access, that's usually because those materials are under revision. So if you could scroll down, Stephanie, to the unit, the curriculum, yep, the pre-lit ESL curriculum. Click on that. And this will take us to, yeah, so this last time it was revised it's ongoing, even though it says 2017. And this is a unit map for all of those CASAS components. And I think on the side here at some point when it's loaded up, you should be able to navigate to transportation week 1. Unless you want to scroll down.
Yeah, I think I might need to scroll down.
Yeah, so it's move up again here.
Sorry. Okay.
Yep, there's transportation and then week 1.
But I don't see that. That's not a link though. Oh, do I click on the number? Looks like it might. No. Oh, okay.
There it is.
Sorry.
Yep.
Got
That's
it.
okay. Yeah, so and actually this unit map highlights explicit TIF skills and then with an activity, and this does say self-management, but there's some overlap here with navigating systems and critical thinking actually. So what we are going to look at here, so we're going to focus on the transportation systems. This could apply to, I'll talk about it a little bit later on how you could incorporate the same kind of routine into a different topic, but for now we're just going to focus on the transportation one. So if you want to click on where it says match a picture. Yeah. So this activity follows from, there's some PowerPoint slides which highlight transportation obstacles one might face out in the community, like you're late for the bus, or you don't have any money for the train, or your car broke down. And students are asked to match a picture of this obstacle to a potential solution. And so after you would go through the vocabulary for that, they would do this matching activity. And this is, you could include, includes pictures as text, but you could have something that's a little bit more text-based if you'd like. I do a lot of these kinds of matching activities with my pre-lit students. Okay, so if you want to scroll down to the next document here, this is an info gap. And the way that I integrate navigating systems with social emotional learning skills is to discuss that sort of language of negotiation needed for self-advocacy before you come to your solution, right? Here, this one is a little bit different. It's, why did you choose this solution? I don't have the time to wait for the bus, or I don't have the time to wait for a taxi. Let me take this mode of transportation, it's free. Or you say, I don't know how to take the bus. I don't know. So that's an option for them to choose here. And so you would have someone ask why, and then they would provide their answer. If I want to scroll down a little bit so I could see the other. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So they chose that solution because it's easy or it's fast. So they have the option to choose a solution, but then you talk about what questions, vocabulary, and what grammar is needed in order to make that decision and navigating that system. You know, taking the bus, for instance, and you don't know if you're on the right bus, for instance, and, you know, excuse me, can you help me? Does this bus go downtown? That might be something that you teach. You know, sort of when you need to ask someone for help, or you don't know where you are, you need to ask for directions, or you need to ask for help with putting money into the machine. So this is all part and parcel of the self-advocacy stuff, and that's built into navigating this transportation system. So that's an example of one activity. You could also have this as a mingle where, you know, you have your question, here it says why, but, or, you know, does this bus go downtown? And you have a bus with a number, and the answer is yes or no. So you could do it with a mingle as well. You could have students take on leadership roles, where they're the teacher, they're the ones asking the question of the whole class. That's kind of like a ball toss situation. And yeah, so this is for transportation, but this could also be embedded into like a housing unit, for instance. So these types of routines, info gap, mingles, matching, can be used with other units like housing, where you're looking at housing problems. And what language do you need for self-advocacy when you've called the manager to address an issue? You talk about the vocabulary to describe the problem, but then that problem hasn't been fixed. You know, who do you call then, and what kind of language is needed to solve your problem? So yes, learning task formats and routines. This is very much a part of, students are familiar with these formats in every unit, and it could be applied. Just got to plug in the new content. It can be used across any kind of unit you're doing. And yeah, so that's it for that.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. And again, just like the IMABE Google site, this is a resource that Chris is all right with us sharing, and you'll find it. Gail put the chat in the link, put the link in the chat, so you can look there. And there are other lessons on the website that you could check out to see if they would work for your students. So again, the Weebly is Teacher Kristen, and there are more lessons available there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Jamie, for talking us through those excellent and practical lessons for low-level learners. That was really helpful. And we got to bring in other TIF ideas, like the fact that we can make these routines by recycling the learning task format. That was great. So what I'm going to talk about real briefly for navigating systems is working with your students on developing a growth mindset. So growth mindset is nothing new. It's something I know I've talked about before. I've done other trainings on. Growth mindset is an educational philosophy, we could call it, that was really pioneered and championed by psychologist and Stanford University professor Carol Dweck. So to sum up growth mindset, it is reminding our students that they need to believe in the power of yet, Y-E-T. A growth mindset means I believe I can get better at something. I understand that intelligence is not fixed. And by trying new strategies and approaches, I can get better at just about anything. So if we want to work with our students on developing a growth mindset, we want to make sure that we praise the process over the product. We encourage active reflection on learning. We work with our students to develop the ability to accurately assess their own strengths and weaknesses, foster an understanding of how each individual learns best, And we remain very committed to the idea that all people can learn. We might just learn in different ways or have different styles. We want to create a classroom culture that encourages setting challenging goals and taking risks. In Carol Dweck's research, she found that students who were most successful, they saw, not scoring well on a test as an opportunity to do better next time. And they were committed to learning from their mistakes. Students who have what's called a fixed mindset believe that if I don't do something well today, I'm just never going to do it well. There is no getting better. And this last point actually comes from Teresa. Help learners to become super balls, not eggs. And what that means is we want our learners to bounce back, not break when they encounter difficult situations. So one way we can do that in the classroom is by being very mindful of the kind of praise that we give. So growth mindset praise always focuses on the effort and never on the final product. So saying things like, I like how you tried a new way to solve that. Whether or not they got the answer right, that's not the point. It's about understanding that when we try new approaches, we are becoming better learners. You've been practicing and I can see it's paying off. Not, gosh, you're so smart. Because being smart is a fixed ability. Applying oneself and doing extra work is a sign of having a growth mindset. Saying things like, I love it when we make mistakes because they're an opportunity to learn. So again, developing that culture in your classroom that mistakes are how we learn and get better. There are some tools that can help with this. This growth mindset feedback tool will be on the resource page. So again, these are just sort of some phrases or talking points you could use with your students. You could maybe make these into a poster that you display in your classroom and just kind of make it your norm to provide feedback in a way that develops a growth mindset. So saying things like, I admire your persistence and I appreciate your effort. It will pay off. Some things you can do with your students is have them do some writing activities. So these are some basic journal prompts. Write about one of the biggest mistakes you've ever made and what did you learn from it. Write about a time when you struggled to accomplish or finish something. Would you rather solve an easy math problem or one that is more difficult, and why? Would you rather write your own opinion essay or copy the teacher's? So these are some sort of prompts for kind of metacognition and helping us to identify in our learners what kind of mindset they have. Once we know that, we could work with them if they have more of a fixed mindset to try to transition over to that growth mindset. This activity, you can find the link will be on the resource list. This comes from a website called Mindset Kit. This activity involves writing a letter to either a future student or to your future self. You have the student write about a time when they struggled and what they learned and what advice they might give to someone who is struggling now. Then the idea is you collect the letters and save them, and you give them back to students during a time when you think they might need some extra encouragement or need to be reminded of how important persistence is. So, if you were going to be doing some testing, or if you knew a student were going to be taking their last GED test, you might give them back their letter as sort of a pep talk to help them get through that challenge. Okay. These activities, these empathy task cards, come from that toolkit that I referenced at the very beginning of the webinar. This social and emotional learning activities for adult multilingual level learners, multilingual learners. So this toolkit, again, was developed by people in Virginia. I wrote a newsletter article about it. The whole toolkit helps us as ABE teachers understand the importance of SEL for our adult learners. So instead of focusing on SEL for children, it does focus on adults. And so I like these because, again, it provides opportunities for us to work with our learners around language we might use in different social situations to help them navigate those experiences. Your coworker's family member died yesterday. When they come back to work, what will you say? Sarah and Abraham had a baby. How do they feel? What would you say to them? And these, there's a little PowerPoint deck that you can access from the toolkit that gives you these images and prompts. There would be no prep. You could just use it in class. Jamal got a promotion. How does he feel? Gloria lost her job. What do you think she is feeling? What advice do you have for her? Again, I could see using these as maybe a, situation of the week that you're going to talk about. You could use them in like a journal for some writing practice. But I love that they provide opportunities for students to test out what they might say in different situations and get feedback from others. Our navigating systems lesson plans, these are completely finished and available. I should mention, I should have mentioned this earlier. I was joined on this project in actually updating the lesson plans by my Minneapolis colleague, Heather Turngren. Many of you know Heather does a lot of work around adult career pathways. She's also been involved in ACES TIF for many, many years. And so she partnered with me on making these lesson updates. And so for the navigating systems lessons, the activity or the 3 levels are develop a goal. That's for the advanced students, and then intermediate level and beginning level students would work on classroom norms. Okay, so again, Gail chatted out the link earlier. You can also find it on the Atlas website under the ACES resource library to check out these newly updated lesson plans. So we are unfortunately not going to have time for a breakout room. I would invite you once again, anyone who might want to share just in the chat an activity around navigating systems that you might try, that you have tried with your students. So Jamie shared the lesson about navigating transportation issues. I shared some growth mindset activities and also those empathy task cards. If you have any activities you use with your students, I would love to see some examples in the chat. It would be great to get other examples from our participants today. And while you're thinking about anything you might want to share, I'm going to go ahead and scroll through a couple of resources. Oh, thanks, Tracy. So Tracy says she hasn't chosen a specific one yet, but she's excited to try out some of these ideas. Wonderful. Well, I really see a big part of these webinars. The purpose is to share ideas and resources so that I kind of look at it as an exchange. You gave up your time to be here, and I hope what we're giving back to you are some ideas you can carry over right into your classrooms. So I hope you find something that works for your learners, Tracy. This is just a screen grab of what this website looks like, the social emotional learning for adult multilingual learners. So it's got 5 sections. It goes over sort of in brief, like what is SEL, Then we've got a nice section on how SEL connects specifically with adult learning. And then it gets into some activities. That's where you would find those task cards. And then there's a large resource section. So this is definitely worth checking out. Tracy, don't you worry about it. Welcome to the field after 1 month. I hope that you are enjoying it. Thank you for being here. Here's a resource that I really like. This is Greater Good in Education. This is out of Berkeley. They have some great resources on their website around social emotional learning. You can see here on the left, these are some of those CASEL competencies, CASEL, excuse me, self-awareness and self-management, social awareness and relationship skills, ethical decision-making, and social responsibility. So you can, click around on here and find different activities or examples for ways to practice this with your students. So here's just an example, a student who chose to be honest that rather than cheat on a test would be using these different skills. So if you did a scenario with your students where you talked about maybe cheating, asking them, well, why, what's the value in not cheating? Here are some of the competencies that students are developing when they do their own work or put in the effort. Callie says, compare the education required for different careers, set goals that align with entering a particular career pathway. Yes, goal setting is absolutely related to SEL. And I love that Callie is such an expert in coming up with these activities for IET. That's great. Thank you, Callie. One more resource here. This comes from NERC, stands for New England Literacy Resource Center. And this is not exactly a new resource, but it contains one of my favorite activities, which is a stress bowl. So you simply fill a bowl with water, set it by the door. You have a little, you have some slips of paper and felt tip pens there. When students enter class, they can write on the paper a few words about anything that might be, anything that's on their minds that might make it difficult for them to learn that day. When they put it into the bowl of water, the ink runs out of the paper, and it's a really beautiful way to symbolize the idea that when we come into class, we have to sort of clear our minds a little bit and get into a space for learning. Of course, that works in an in-person class. And I also found in this resource something that would work online. It's an online letting go practice. That's what you see here with the dandelion or the puff ball there. So this is something I worked through this a little bit when I was preparing for the webinar. Kind of a cool activity that you could do with your learners or just provide to them as a resource. So that's called a letting go practice. Okay, I know we're at time. We are just about done. Just a reminder that some important upcoming events. We have on April 28th, the Spring 2023 ABE Virtual Conference. There will be a lot of great sessions delivered on many different topics. And then Summer Institute, of course, coming back in person this year, August 16th through 18th in St. Cloud. Teresa says she's got great ideas to share, or these are great ideas to share with the teacher team. Oh, that's awesome. So going to be wrapping up their ACES TIF work for the year. Thank you so much for being here, Teresa. It's always wonderful to have you and to know that you're staying connected to this field and the work here. These are the resources, everyone. So Gail will be sharing with you in a follow-up email by the end of this week. In the next couple of days, you'll get a PDF of the slides, an evaluation, and we ask for you to fill out the evaluation and we share so that we can have ideas going forward for what you might like to hear about in these webinars. Okay. So that is it. Thank you so much for being here today. I know how valuable your time is, and I really appreciate you being here. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.